The day gray spoke louder than stones. Imagine standing in the dusty streets of ancient Jerusalem. The air is thick with heat, with whispers, with judgment. Crowds are gathering, faces hard with righteousness. And in the center of it all, a woman trembling, a man silent, and a question that will shake history. Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act. The law says she should be stoned. What do you say? What Jesus did next wasn't just unexpected. It changed the way humanity would understand mercy forever. Introduction, setting the stage. It was early morning. The sun had just begun to rise over the temple courts, spilling golden light across the stone steps. People gathered around, waiting for the teacher from Galilee, this man who spoke like no rabbi they had ever heard. His words had power, not the kind that ruled by fear, but by truth. He spoke of a kingdom not made by hands, of a love that could forgive even the darkest sin. And that morning, as he began to teach, the peace was shattered. A group of men pushed through the crowd, robes flowing, eyes sharp. In their hands, they dragged a woman. Her hair was tangled, her face streaked with tears and dust. She didn't look up. Shame held her gaze to the ground. The Pharisees, the guardians of the law, had come not to learn, but to trap. They threw her before Jesus' feet, the way one might throw a stone. Teacher, one of them sneered, this woman was caught in adultery, in the very act. Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. What do you say? The crowd fell silent. Every breath hung in the air. They thought they had him. If he said, let her go, he'd be defying Moses. If he said, stone her, he'd be defying Rome. Either way, he'd be finished. But Jesus didn't answer. He didn't even look at them. Instead, he did something no one expected. He bent down and began to write in the dust. The stillness before the storm. The Pharisees watched him closely. What was he doing? Writing? Drawing? Ignoring them? The crowd leaned in, curious and confused. The sound of their accusations faded, replaced by the soft scrape of his finger against the ground. In that moment, it was as if time itself paused. Dust swirled in the light, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. And though no one could read the words, the ground beneath their feet was bearing witness to something divine. The same finger that once carved the commandments into stone was now tracing grace into dust. The question that revealed every heart. They kept pressing him, voices rising in anger. Finally, he stood up. His eyes met theirs, steady, piercing, full of something they couldn't understand. And he said one sentence. Let the one among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. Then he stooped down again and continued writing. It was the quietest kind of judgment, a mirror held up to the soul. And one by one, the stones began to fall. First from the oldest hands, the ones who lived long enough to know their own sin too well. Then the younger followed, until the only sound left was a heartbeat of mercy, the woman and the Savior. When the last man had gone, Jesus lifted his head. The woman still stood there, alone, shaking but alive. He asked her gently, Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? Through tears she whispered, No one, Lord. And Jesus said, Neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin. He didn't excuse her sin. He ended her shame. In a world eager to throw stones, he chose to heal instead. Transition to the body. But what really happened that day, beyond what we read? What did he write on the ground? Why did the accusers walk away without another word? And what does this moment reveal about who Jesus truly is? Let's step back into that scene and uncover the deeper meaning. Hidden in the dust beneath his hands. Natural segue into the full body of the video. The words written in dust. The scene was silent. Only the faint whisper of the wind moved through the temple courtyard. People had come expecting a judgment, but instead they were witnessing a mystery. Jesus bent down again, his finger tracing words into the dust. The same ground where the woman's tears had fallen now held the handwriting of heaven. No one knew what he wrote, but somehow everyone felt what it meant. The writing that spoke without words. Some scholars have wondered for centuries. What did he write? The gospel doesn't tell us. And maybe that's the point, because the message wasn't meant to be read by eyes. It was meant to be read by hearts. Perhaps he was writing the secret sins of those standing before him. Perhaps he was reminding them of their own moments of failure. Or maybe he was writing the very words of Jeremiah. Those who turn away from you will be written in the dust, because they have forsaken the Lord, the fountain of living water. The irony is breathtaking. Just one day earlier, during the great Feast of Tabernacles, Jesus had stood before the same people and cried out, "If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink." He had called himself the living water. Now, the same religious leaders who refused that water were watching as their names were written in the dust. Exactly as the prophet had said, they came to trap him with the law, but he showed them that the law itself pointed to him, the law and the giver of law. You see, these men carried the law of Moses in their hands, but they did not carry mercy in their hearts. They quoted scripture, but they had forgotten its author. When they dragged the woman into the temple court, they were so consumed with proving they were right. They never stopped to ask if they were righteous. They demanded justice for her sin, but were blind to their own. And standing before them was the one who had written that very law with his own divine hand centuries before. The same finger of God that carved the commandments into stone now traced words of grace into the dirt. The contrast was divine poetry. The law had been written on stone, hard, cold, unyielding. Grace was now being written on dust, soft, fragile, easily moved by the breath of God. One could never erase the law. But grace? Grace could rewrite the story. The power of one sentence. Let the one among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone. It wasn't a challenge. It was an invitation. An invitation to honesty. No shouting, no thunder, no threats. Just truth. And truth, when spoken by Jesus, had a weight that crushed pride and lifted shame all at once. The oldest dropped their stones first. They had lived long enough to know. Life has a way of reminding you of your own cracks, your own failures. The younger followed, slowly realizing that they were no better. The sound of stones hitting the ground echoed like thunder rolling through the soul. Each thud was a sound of judgment dying. When the dust finally settled, there was only one person left who had the right to condemn her, and he chose not to. The eyes of mercy. Jesus lifted his gaze. The woman stood frozen. Her shoulders trembled. Her eyes dared not rise. He looked at her, not with the eyes of a judge, but with the gaze of a healer. There was no anger there, only light. "Woman, where are they?" He asked softly. "Has no one condemned you?" She swallowed, tears streaking her face. "No one, Lord." And then came words she would never forget. "Neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin." That was it. No long sermon. No public shame. Just mercy that spoke louder than any stone ever could. A different kind of freedom. For the first time in her life, she was truly free. Not because her accusers were gone, but because she had encountered the one who saw her completely, and still loved her completely. Forgiveness didn't erase her past. It gave her future. Jesus didn't say, "You're innocent." He said, "You're forgiven." And that difference changes everything. Because forgiveness doesn't deny what we've done. It redeems who we are. That day, she walked away not just uncondemned, but reborn. The heart of the message. This moment reveals something astonishing about God's heart. The Pharisees wanted to expose sin. Jesus wanted to expose grace. They wanted to shame. He wanted to save. In his silence, he spoke the loudest truth. Mercy isn't weakness. It's the deepest kind of strength. Every law points to justice, but every act of Jesus points to love. Because the cross wasn't a contradiction of the law. It was a fulfillment of it. He didn't come to erase the law. He came to complete it with compassion. That's why this story isn't just about a woman caught in sin. It's about all of us, caught in the dust of our own failures, and still found by the same mercy. When grace meets dust, there's something poetic about dust. It's fragile. It's fleeting. It doesn't last long on its own. And yet, from the very beginning, God formed humanity from the dust. Maybe that's why Jesus chose to write there. Because he was reminding us that even in our lowest, dirtiest state, we are still the canvas of God's touch. When divine fingers write on human dust, grace becomes visible. It's as if he was saying, I know what you are made of, and I still choose to love you. The accusers and the accused. We often read this story as if it's about two kinds of people, the guilty woman and the righteous man. But the truth is, both were sinners. Both needed grace. One was caught in the act. The others were caught in their pride. One was ashamed of what she had done. The others were blind to what they had become. And Jesus came for both. He didn't shame the woman. He didn't destroy the accusers. He simply revealed the truth that every soul must face. All have sinned. All need grace. The scene fades. As the crowd dispersed, the temple courtyard returned to silence. The dust slowly settled over the words he had written, covering them like a secret between heaven and earth. The woman walked away, and the teacher stood watching her go, knowing that soon he himself would face the judgment she had escaped. Because one day, those same hands that wrote in the dust would be pierced for her sins, and ours. He would take the stones meant for us, not by dodging them, but by absorbing their full weight on the cross. That's what grace looks like. Unfair, undeserved, unstoppable. The ending, the dust and the mercy. The sun began to set over Jerusalem. The city, restless, ancient, eternal, was wrapped in that golden haze where time itself seems to hold its breath. And there in the quiet, the story we thought belonged to the past began to whisper again, because that moment, when Jesus knelt and wrote in the dust, was never just about a single woman or a single sin. It was a mirror, one that still reflects the hearts of every person who has ever judged, condemned, or been condemned. The crowd had gathered to throw stones, convinced of their own righteousness. But when Jesus said, "He who is without sin, let him cast the first stone," something in the air shifted. The oldest among them dropped their stones first. Then the younger followed, until all that was left was silence. Just Jesus, the woman, and the sound of mercy. And maybe that silence was the loudest sermon ever preached. Pause for reflection. Even now, Jerusalem carries that silence. The same streets where people once shouted for blood still echo with the footsteps of pilgrims seeking forgiveness. The same stones that once could have killed now lie beneath the feet of those who kneel to pray. It's as if the city remembers not only what we've done, but what grace has undone. For thousands of years, kingdoms have risen and fallen upon this soil. Empires have claimed it, prophets have wept over it, and armies have shed their blood for it. Yet through it all, one truth remains unshaken. Mercy outlasts judgment. Love outlives law. And maybe that's what's unfolding again in Jerusalem today. Not just wars or politics or prophecies come and pass, but the same divine confrontation between pride and compassion, between law and grace, between darkness and the light of the living word. Because the story of that woman and the dust beneath her feet still speaks. Every time we point a finger at someone else, that dust rises again. Every time we forget our own brokenness, the echo of his voice returns. Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. It's a call, not just to the woman, not just to Israel, but to the whole world. Gentle music tone. When Jesus wrote in the dust, he wasn't ignoring the law. He was fulfilling it. He showed that justice and mercy were never enemies. They were always meant to hold hands. The dust of the ground, the same dust from which humanity was formed, became the canvas of redemption that day. He stooped down to the level of our shame and lifted us into grace. And if we truly believe that, then we cannot look at Jerusalem or at each other the same way again. Because the real shaking of the world won't come from earthquakes or wars or even prophecies fulfilled. It will come when hearts of stone turn into hearts of flesh. When judgment turns into compassion. When the proud kneel in the dust and find mercy written in it. That's the power of the gospel, quiet yet unstoppable. It doesn't demand a throne or a sword. It begins in the dirt and ends in resurrection. Soft pause. Look again at the city. See the children running through the old streets. See the elderly lighting candles, whispering prayers. See the sky that once held the cross now glowing with the same sun that rose 3 days later. Jerusalem is more than geography. It is the heart of the story, the place where God chose to touch earth with his mercy. And maybe, just maybe, the same hand that wrote in the dust is still writing. In the chaos of our world, in the ashes of our mistakes, in the soil of every heart that dares to hope again. He is still saying, "Neither do I condemn you." He is still stooping down into your story, into mine, transforming dust into destiny. Because mercy didn't end that day in Jerusalem. It began there. And as the wind sweeps once more across the stones of the ancient city, you can almost hear it. The whisper of grace, carried by the same breath that first gave us life, fade out with soft instrumental music, golden light over Jerusalem's skyline.